Yo, what's up? It's easy. In this video, we'll go over how to correctly execute the fire MAGE rotation using all the common builds used in both Raiding and Mythic Plus. The aim of this guide is to teach you why certain builds are used, so you can make your own informed decisions in the future. So, how exactly do we play fire MAGE? Fire relies on landing 2 non-periodic critical strikes in a row to gain the hot streak buff, which in turn enables our hardest hitting abilities to become instant cast and to contribute double the amount of our mastery ignite. To aid us in landing these important crits, our skill set is complemented with passives which increase our crit chance and spells which have a 100% crit chance. This is to alleviate some of the older issues fire MAGE used to run into, where it was only possible to play the spec at all at the ends of the expansions due to finally being able to get enough critical strike from gear itself. Let's have a closer look at what exactly these spells and passives do to help us. The first passive is Critical Mass. Critical Mass increases our crit chance by a base 15% and increases the amount of crit chance we get from all sources by 10%. This means the lowest possible amount of crit strike a fire mage can have is 20%, since every spec also has a base 5%. Interestingly, we also have a base 6% mastery. This passive is not something you need to track or care about, but is important to know nonetheless. The second passive we have is Enhanced Pyrotechnics. Every time your fireball doesn't crit, it gains a stacking 10% increased chance to crit. This effect lasts until your fireball finally crits and acts as a kind of bad luck protection. It is important to note that you can track this buff to know when your next fireball will be a guaranteed crit, which gives you more preparation time when considering your next spell. The first active spell is called Fire Blast, which is instant cast, has no travel time, is off the GCD, and can be cast while another spell is casting, stacking up to 2 times, 3 with the talent Flame on. This is what makes fire mage unique among its spellcaster counterparts, and also makes the playstyle very fast paced, putting heavy emphasis on reaction times, decision making, and future planning. The second spell in our arsenal is our artifact trait, Phoenix Flames. Phoenix Flames, or PF for short, is instant cast and always critically strikes. However, unlike Fire Blast, does have travel time, is on the GCD, and cannot be cast during another cast. It also stacks up to 3 times, however has a much longer recharge rate at 45 seconds. The golden trait Phoenix Reborn has a random chance per ignite tick to reduce the cooldown by 10 seconds. The most important part of Fire Mage is understanding and mastering the hot streak mechanic, which comes in 2 parts, Heating Up and Hot Streak. Heating Up appears as a buff when you score 1 critical hit on your target. If you score another critical hit within 10 seconds, this buff turns into Hot Streak, which lasts for 15 seconds. We then use this buff to fire off 1 of 2 hard-hitting finisher abilities. However, if you do not score 2 critical hits in a row, you lose the Heating Up buff and have to restart the process. There are 6 builder spells which contribute to Hot Streak generation: Fireball, Fire Blast, Pyroblast, Phoenix Flames, Scorch, and Dragon's Breath with the Alexstrasza's Fury talent. And only 2 finishing spells which can be used to spend your hot streak: Pyroblast and Flame Strike. So the question is, what is the best way to combine our 6 builder spells to generate and spend our 2 finishers? Let's have a look. Fireball is your base ability and will be the keybind you press most often. It has a 2.25 second cast time before haste, hits rather weak, and fills up all the downtime between all your other cool abilities. The most basic and fundamental rotation consists of casting Fireball until you get a Heating Up proc, turn Heating Up into Hot Streak with Fire Blast, use Hot Streak to launch an instant cast Pyroblast. What about all this time spent waiting for a Fireball to hit the target and give me a Heating Up proc? Instead of waiting, we are going to continue casting Fireball and then Fire Blast as soon as we get a Heating Up proc, to then launch the Pyro at the same time as the Fireball finishes casting. This is what's called the Fireball Pyro chaining mechanic. Since both spells hit the boss at roughly the same time, it is possible, if they both crit, to reactivate Hot Streak instantly without the need to Fire Blast, simply casting Fireball into Pyroblast over and over. While we cannot get enough crit rating to reliably game this mechanic, you can test it if you get a Hot Streak proc and then pop Combustion and Fireball Pyro repeatedly until Combustion runs out. Not something you would do in an actual scenario, purely for testing. What happens if the first spell crits and the second one does not, even though they hit the boss at the exact same time? Will I gain Heating Up and then instantly lose it? Interestingly, no. Blizzard added an undocumented mechanic which essentially saves your heating up proc from disappearing if the two spells hit within a very short time frame of each other, roughly 0.2 seconds. When this happens, you should cast Fire Blast during your current Fireball cast to resume the chain. Due to the Nighthold 2 set bonus giving Enhanced Pyrotechnics 30% increased crit chance for a Fireball to crit up from 10%, it is much easier to predict when your next Fireball will be a guaranteed crit. If you have at least 40% crit chance, the maximum number of Fireballs you will cast in a row is 3, with the last one always critting. With this knowledge, we are able to cast Fire Blast before the Fireball has even reached the target, meaning the Fire Blast grants us heating up with the Fireball proccing Hot Streak. The only gameplay benefit to this is we get Fire Blast cooldown rolling a bit faster, but the real strength comes from turning an element of RNG into something we can control and prepare for, something very undervalued. The reduction in RNG and an extra second or two of future planning time is what makes the 2-piece tier 19 very strong, and in general makes the rotation much more fluid and, more importantly, controlled. While it doesn't give you that much of a DPS gain, it makes the spec much more playable and should be directly built into the spec itself. The less RNG, the better. One very important thing to note is to never cancel your current cast to get your pyro out sooner. This is a straight up DPS loss and also breaks the Fireball pyro chaining rhythm. The only exceptions would be if you have to move or a target is going to die before your Fireball reaches it. The same rotation can be used by replacing Fireball with Scorch. Scorch can be cast while moving but does very little damage and has no bad luck protection like Fireball does in Enhanced Pyrotechnics. If you are using Corellon's Burning Touch and the boss is 30% or below, Scorch replaces Fireball in the standard rotation. Scorch however hits the boss nearly instantly, so while it is technically possible to Scorch Pyro Chain, it is much harder and less reliable to achieve since it is too dependent on how fast you can queue your abilities and your ping to the server. Therefore, casting a Scorch Pyro rotation is preferred while filling in Fire Blasts whenever possible. Flame Strike is our AoE finisher which uses a targeting reticle to aim the ability. The Flame Strike rotation cannot benefit from a 2-spell chaining combo because Flame Strike doesn't contribute to Hot Streak generation. This means once you have a Hot Streak proc and you are already casting your next Fireball/Scorch, you can only generate a heating up proc and not the full on Hot Streak. This leads to unavoidable heating up munching which is usually offset with the use of Phoenix Flames, which we will cover later on. So, TLDR, spam Fireball or Scorch, hit Fire Blast during the Fireball cast as soon as heating up appears, cast Pyroblast or Flame Strike once you gain Hot Streak. Before we start looking into various Combustion rotations, let's first understand the theory behind Combustion. Combustion increases our crit chance by 100% and grants mastery equal to 50% of our crit strike stat. If we have 10,000 crit rating, 5,000 of that will be added to our mastery rating. The main goal of every Combustion is to fit as many hard hitting abilities into the 10-second window as possible, increase the 14-second window with the pre-ignition trait. Since Pyroblast is our overall hardest hitting ability, we want to proc Hot Streak as many times as we can. Phoenix Flames and Fire Blast are instant cast and both contribute to Hot Streak generation, making it essential to save up as many stacks as possible going into each Combustion. Weaving these spells together alongside Pyro chaining guarantees the maximum number of Pyroblasts per Combustion. If you are to run out of instant cast spells, casting Scorch is the next on the priority list due to its extremely short cast time and Hot Streak generation. Avoid casting Fireball inside Combustions at all times. Let's look at a single target Firestarter build, the most common build used in raiding. This build consists of Firestarter, Mirror Images, and Meteor. Firestarter is picked on mainly single target fights or fights where adds are of little importance. Fireball and Pyroblast both gain 100% crit chance while the target's above 90% health, making it a waste to use Combustion since that also gives us 100% crit chance. Instead, we delay Combustion until after 90%, giving us a mini Combustion before our actual one. A really great thing about this opener is that the legendary braces have a high chance to proc due to the amount of Hot Streak generation we can achieve during the first 10% of the boss fight. We can then open the Combustion rotation with a hardcast Pyro to generate very large ignites. There are multiple ways you can open with Flame Strike depending on how long the boss stays above 90%. You will still want to have as many instant casts available during your first combustion as possible, but also not be sat on max stats for extensive periods of time, since there's a ways to not have them recharging. This also applies to Meteor, but only to the extent where you would gain one extra Meteor charge in the entire fight. The rules of the Firestar opening are: float one Phoenix Flame charge, float one Fire Blast charge, but aim to have all three going into Combustion. Use Meteor during Combustion unless the target is above 90% for a longer period of time, Star Auger for example. Otherwise, use it on cooldown. Combust your first cast, which will land on the target where the target's HP is below 90%. A typical opener may look like this: Pre-pot and pre-cast Pyroblast, Mirror Images plus Fire Blast, Pyroblast, Phoenix Flames, Fireball Pyro Chain until sub 90% HP, dump all remaining hot streaks. If you have a Braces proc, hardcast Pyro into Combustion plus Racials. If no proc, cast Fireball instead. Pyro Chain with Fire Blasts, Meteor, Phoenix Flame Pyro Chain, dump any remaining Pyro Fire Blast chains, Scorch when there is nothing else to press. The next two builds use the talent Conflagration. Conflag is used when there are enough adds in the encounter for Flare Up to make a significant impact. Surprisingly, the Conflag dot itself does very little damage, while Flare Up does exponentially more damage the more mobs there are to AoE, similar to Living Bomb. Let's first look at a single target Conflag build, followed by an AoE one. Conflag, Mirror Images, and Meteor. Used when the encounter is mainly single target, but there are some adds as well. When not using Firestarter, you can open with the Combustion rotation as soon as the fight starts. The main difference is you'll want to specifically cast Meteor and then Mirror Images while combusting, before the Meteor graphic appears on screen. Meteor snapshots to when the graphic appears in the sky and not when it lands in the ground. This means you lose a few tenths of a second in Combustion, but guarantee that your Meteor will 100% crit. Some people prefer to use Meteor later into the Combustion to guarantee 5 stacks of Pyretic Incantation, but I personally prefer the Meteor before Bust method as it allows us to fit in one extra Pyroblast. Chronomatic Anomaly is a good example of when you could use this build. Here are two openers, the first when your precast Fireball crits and the second when it did not. Pre-pot and precast Fireball, Meteor, Mirror Images into Combustion plus Racials before the Meteor graphic appears in the sky. Fireblast Pyroblast Chain, Phoenix Flames Pyroblast Chain, Fireblast Pyro when it comes off cooldown, Scorch Pyro Chain until Combustion ends. Pre-pot and precast Fireball, Meteor, Mirror Images into Combustion and Racials before the Meteor graphic appears in the sky, Phoenix Flames, Fireblast Pyroblast Chain, Phoenix Flames Fireblast Chain, Fireblast Pyro when it comes off cooldown, Scorch Pyro Chain until Combustion ends. Conflag, Rune of Power, and Cinderstorm, the AoE build. This build emphasizes the cleave from Cinderstorm with the added 40% damage of Rune of Power, and is the go-to Mythic Plus build. Typically this build is taken when there are a lot of AoE burst opportunities, as is usually accompanied by either Living Bomb or Flame Patch. It also provides quite competitive single target, which makes it a much more versatile build than the others. There are multiple ways you can use your hot streaks depending on the type of encounter you are up against: single target, priority target, and AoE. Single target and priority target rotations are exactly the same. The idea of priority target is to kill one target as fast as possible while still applying damage to the other mobs around it. This means that hot streak procs are used for Pyroblast, and the main source of AoE damage comes from building a large ignite on one target and spreading it to all other targets in the area. An example of when you would want to do a rotation like this is on the packs in Halls of Valor, which contain a Thundercaller and one or two other mobs. The Thundercallers need to die very quickly, as their lightning strikes on random party members combined with their AoE stuns can very easily overwhelm the group. The other mobs are less important, but still need to be AoE'd down at a reasonable rate to keep on track with the timer. The new trait, Strafing Run, also passively aids in AoEing without taking focus off the priority target. Again, here are two openers, the first when your precast Fireball crits and the second when it does not. Pre-pot and precast Fireball, Rune of Power, Cinderstorm into Combustion plus Racials, Fireblast Pyro Chain, Phoenix Flames Pyro Chain, For single target, Fire Blast Pyro into Scorch Pyro Chain, and for priority target, Cinderstorm, Fire Blast Pyro into Scorch Pyro Chain to finish. Pre-pot and precast Fireball, Rune of Power, Cinderstorm into Combustion plus Racials, Phoenix Flames, Fire Blast Pyro Chain, Phoenix Flames Pyro Chain. For single target, Fire Blast Pyro into Scorch Pyro Chain, and for priority target, Cinderstorm, Fire Blast Pyro into Scorch Pyro Chain to finish. The pure AoE rotation focuses more on Living Bomb or Flame Patch and uses hot streaks for flame strikes instead of pyros. This build focuses more on the raw throughput of these spells and less on spreading big ignites. You may use this rotation when it doesn't matter which mobs dies first or the mobs do not last long enough for ignite to tick enough times. Scorpion is a great example of this. Since Flame Strike doesn't contribute to hot streak generation, the rotation utilizes Phoenix Flames, Fire Blasts and Scorch to gain hot streaks and is therefore slower than a pyro rotation. Here is how you would go about the Flame Strike rotation. Pre-pot plus Living Bomb, Rune of Power, Cinderstorm into Combustion plus Racials, Phoenix Flames, Fire Blast, Flame Strike, Living Bomb, Cinderstorm, Scorch, Fire Blast, Flame Strike. Incanter's Flow, Kindling, and the Legendary Gloves. A newer and more controversial build relative to the others, the Incanter's Flow Kindling build focuses on trading burst damage for more sustained, smoother damage output throughout an entire fight. It provides great AoE potential while not suffering from any of the downsides of Rune of Power, which is being locked into a specific spot and only lasting 10 seconds. And synergizes well with the Legendary Gloves, pulling Combustion's cooldown down to roughly 1 minute, which is half its normal cooldown. The build shines when there are a good mix of intermittent AoE, priority target, and single target combined, or when you can line up Combustions with a specific timing throughout the course of the fight. A good place to use this build would be in Mythic Gul'dan, for example, which combines all the above points into one fight. There are multiple types of adds to deal with, which include burst AoE and priority target, while also focusing on the boss itself. You also cannot remain stationary that much, and may find Rune of Power too restrictive in that regard. However, there are multiple issues with this build. Kindling is only affected by Fireball, Fire Blast and Pyroblast. You start losing value whenever there is burst AoE and you start flame striking. While you gain more combustions during the fight, they are much weaker than a Rune of Power or Meteor build, since you typically will only have 2 Phoenix Flames per combustion instead of 3. Kindling is unpredictable. A string of bad luck can result in very few crits, delaying your combustion significantly and possibly even missing the window you were trying to push for. Anti-synergy between Firestarter, Legendary Belt and the 2-set tier 19 bonus. Kindling is more valuable the more crit you have, so you presumably want to put on more crit gear, while the 3 previously mentioned items devalue crit because A. Firestarter gives you a 100% crit chance, so any additional crit is wasted. B. The Legendary Belt gives Scorch a 100% crit chance below 30%. And C. The tier 19 set bonus makes Enhanced Pyrotechnics grant 20 additional crit chance per stack, which is more free crit essentially. Legendary Gloves have to replace the belt in the 2 Legendary Equipped requirement, and using the gloves mean you cannot use the Nighthold 2 set along with the Tomb of Sargeras 4 set in the upcoming 7.2.5 patch. For Mythic Plus, Incanter's Flow is also significantly worse than Rune of Power. There is never a situation where you would prefer constant damage over more burst, outside of running super low keys where you simply do not have the time to stand in your rune. But realistically, when does that ever happen? Kindling plus Gloves, however, are excellent in super high fortified Mythic Plus, where the mobs last long enough to combust the start of every pack. Combining the priority target nature of super high keys with the burst potential of Rune of Power and huge ignites during combustion makes this an excellent and engaging build to play. Taking Incanter's Flow and Kindling means training 2 active spells for 2 passives. This makes the combustion rotation the most basic one out of them all, only using Phoenix Flames, Pyroblast, Fire Blast and Scorch. Pre-pot plus Fireball plus Combustion and Racials. Phoenix Flames, Fire Blast Pyro Chain, Phoenix Flames Pyro Chain, Fire Blast Pyro, Scorch Pyro Chain until combustion ends. Legendary Helm plus Alexstrasza's Fury builds. The Legendary Helm plus Alexstrasza's Fury are only used in multi-target encounters, or when there is a huge amount of ads which require bursting very quickly, the majority of Mythic Plus and Croesus for example. Taking Alexstrasza's Fury means you lose 1 charge of Fire Blast, and the cooldown of Fire Blast is 8 seconds up from 6 before haste. Since Alexstrasza's Fury makes Dragon's Breath contribute to hot streak generation, consider Helm an extension of Phoenix Flames as they are used in exactly the same way. Aim to use Dragon's Breath on cooldown. Pre-pot plus Fireball plus Combustion and Erasures. Phoenix Flames, Fire Blast Pyro Chain, Phoenix Flames Pyro Chain, Dragon's Breath, Fire Blast Pyro, Scorch Pyro Chain until Combustion ends. That concludes this video on the Fire Mage rotations and hopefully informed you about why certain builds are used in every situation. I will talk more about the pros and cons of certain talents in a separate video for both Raiding and Mythic Plus to avoid making this one even longer. Was the content presented well? Easily understandable? Make any sense at all? If you have any feedback suggestions, then hit me up in the comments below, as I'm always looking to improve my instructional videos to help as many of you as possible. Thanks very much for watching, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.